A Kazuo Ishiguro's The Buried Giant was initially published in 2015, a full decade after the author's previous novel, Never Let Me Go. Unlike his earlier books, this is a fantasy novel set in post-Arthurian England with ogres, knights, and dragons. Oh my. The story is anchored by a journey and a quest, but it also features intense action sequences, powerful, painful themes, and a shifting narrative point of view. There is a cheeky first-person narrator who occasionally breaks in to point out how England in the Dark Ages was different than it is today, but for the most part the story is delivered in third person. However, there are also a handful of chapters told from a warrior apprentice called Edwin's perspective, and 2 chapters are narrated in first person from Sir Gawain, a washed-up old knight from King Arthur's Round Table who desperately clings to his final mission. The fragmented narration makes sense, given that the plot is also about fragmentation and broken memory. It explores the discrepancy between individual and collective memory, and seems to suggest that when we can't have justice, we sometimes turn towards vengeance. This is shown to be true not just in the large scope of warrior-based societies, but in the smaller scale of our interpersonal relationships too. We must forget the atrocities that we commit in order to move past them, and then they become the buried giant, which can be awakened if we don't tread carefully. The Buried Giant was not universally loved by Ishiguro's fans immediately upon its publication, but now that some time has passed, I think that many readers can get beyond some of the challenges that the structure and the style pose, and appreciate the book for what it is, rather than being frustrated with what it isn't. With the possibility of a forthcoming animated feature from Guillermo del Toro on the horizon, more readers are sure to be drawn to this compelling novel from one of our greatest living authors.
The first time I read The Buried Giant, it was from this vintage trade paperback edition. It has a great cover design with a creepy drawing of a hawthorn tree and dots and swirls around it in gold foil. These are likely meant to represent the mist and magic of the story. This design is also repeated on the title page, with simple pages signaling each of the novel's 4 parts. I really loved this story, so when I came across the American hardcover edition at a used bookshop, I grabbed it as an upgrade. Rather than this cold blue color, it has an olive green cover and features a drawing of a medieval grail in the center. It is also surrounded by swirls and magic in gold foil. Beneath the dust jacket, the boards are done in a green textured paper meant to look like leather, with a quarter binding in a marbled coppery green. The front cover is blocked here with one of the markings from the dust jacket artwork. The most unique feature of this edition is the lovely end paper maps by artist Neil Gower. On this pale map we can identify locations from the story like the Old Thorn, the Giant, Querig's Lair, the Boatman, and the whole landscape is shrouded by the mist that seems to erase memory. This hardback was a nice upgrade for me, but as soon as the Folio Society announced that they would be releasing an illustrated version of the novel, I knew I had to upgrade a second time. So let's do this. And here we have The Buried Giant from the Folio Society. This version was released in 2023. It's presented in a lovely illustrated slipcase that takes some aesthetic cues from the paperback and hardback editions, but pushes them much further. We've got silhouetted shapes of Sir Gawain and young Edwin. Here are Axel and Beatrice, who are pretty much the sweetest old couple ever, and they walk across a field that wraps around to the other side, which features the warrior Wistan who rides with his sword held aloft. All of this is on a lovely olive green background of plains and hills, with the swirls of mist again represented in gold foil. Now the interplay between the slipcase and the book's cover is especially clever. In contrast to the green of the slipcase, the book cover is in red cloth. The mist has been wiped away here, and now we can see what lies beneath. Dangerous cliffs, skulls, and the remnants of battle are revealed in the fields. The silhouette figures, as well as the swords and arrows, are recessed right into the cloth surface, and they stand out due to the contrast. The effect is even more dramatic in direct sunlight. On the book's spine, the author's name is printed in black, while the title and publisher logo are recessed like the swords on the cover. The binding is finished with green head and tail bands. When we open the book, we're met by green printed end papers in a medium weight stock. The gold swirls and green color carry over from the slipcase, again recalling the mist and magic. The title page features this silhouette lifted from the cover image, and each of the novel's 4 sections is introduced with plain title pages and a Roman numeral. The book is printed on Abbey wove paper, Folio's standard paper for the text block, which is thick, smooth, acid-free, and comes in at a warm, slightly cream-colored white. If we bring back the vintage edition for a brief side-by-side, we can see that the Folio Society edition is bigger, with an extra 2.5 centimeters in the height and 3 centimeters in the width. The font size is perhaps a touch larger in the Folio version, with even more generous margins. The text is also much darker and crisper, which improves the contrast and enhances the readability of the Folio edition. The introduction is by Daniel Kellman, the celebrated German author of many successful novels and plays. In this introduction, Kellman warns about spoilers right from the beginning and suggests reading the book first before considering his words. Then he looks at the central secret of the book and convincingly connects it to a handful of contemporary situations from our recent history. Finally, he speaks to the novel's thematic subtlety as he closes this brief but excellent 3-page introduction. The interior artwork, like the cover and slipcase, is by Jana Heidersdorf. She's an artist who specializes in dark fantasy. Her haunting artwork is often achieved through a combination of traditional and digital techniques. Her illustrations have been published as the covers for comic books and novels, and she's even had some releases of her own. She also has a pretty neat presence online, and has even made a YouTube video where she unboxes this very book. For The Buried Giant, Heidersdorf has provided 7 color illustrations and 4 black and white pieces. The black and white artwork is done in pen and ink, and is featured at the beginning of each of the novel's 4 sections. Let's take a look at these black and white illustrations first. Part 1 of the novel opens with this image of a candle that's just been blown out. I love the stippled gradient work behind it, and it seems like the perfect image for the book's early section, as Beatrice and Axel have recently lost their candle privileges in their warren. Beatrice is especially offended by this slight. Candles continue to be featured in the plot, and function as symbols throughout the rest of the book. Part 2 opens in a monastery, and our characters rest up in a tower with many crows, blackbirds, and wood pigeons haunting the rafters. One monk, Brother Erasmus, is convinced that the birds are demons and tries to kill them. Later, we learn that in a ritual, the birds come with fury in their eyes and tear at the monk's flesh. The crows here are depicted looking rather fearsome. Their fury comes across in this dynamic drawing through the movement lines and the stray feathers that swirl around them. Part 3 features this drawing of a goat tethered to a post. It stands near a clearing, happily eating the stubby grass, as Beatrice and Axel take shelter behind these 2 large rocks, leaning one toward the other, like an old married couple. More great stippling here conveys the depth of the scene, including the subtle shadow cast by the stones. Part 4 opens with this drawing of 2 swords crossed. This is the Briton blade, and this is the Saxon sword. Yet again, we've got stippling behind the weapons, which helps them pop off the page. The blood on the tip of the Saxon blade may allude to the outcome of a duel that occurs in this section, but it could also foreshadow the events that will occur after the book closes. And yes, these hilts do indeed match up to swords held by particular characters in the color images, for all you detail-oriented detectives out there. I'm one of you. The colored artwork is presented on smooth photographic paper, and the images typically land within 5 pages of the text they coincide with, which is fantastic. Let's take a detailed look at the color artwork now. The first is of a scene that Axel remembers one morning as he waits for his wife Beatrice to wake up. He recalls a gray morning, possibly back in November, when a strange lady in dark rags appeared near their village. While the other women fear that the stranger is a demon, Beatrice approaches her to extend some care to the heartbroken and hungry stranger. This is Axel making his way up the incline to the Old Thorn, a local beauty spot marked by a hawthorn tree that grows out of the rock at the edge of a promontory. As he approaches through the morning mist, Axel sees the two women as almost silhouettes against the white sky. The stranger sits, her back against the rock, with her cloak flapping in the wind like a great bird. Beatrice stands with head lowered toward her companion in quiet conversation as Axel approaches. We learn that the stranger tells Beatrice something of great interest, something that will linger in her mind for some time. It's after this conversation that Beatrice asks Axel about what they don't remember and suggests visiting their son. This is just what I want from the frontispiece for The Buried Giant. It's dark and cold, with swirls of mist and a color scheme that matches the slipcase. The second illustration is of this ancient woman who holds a rabbit with a blade to its throat. Her sunken eyes and the rusty knife are lifted right out of the novel's description, and I love the details of her face and hands. This is an unsettling image from an unsettling scene in the book, as the woman tells Axel and Beatrice about how the boatman separated her from her husband. This is the second time Beatrice has heard such a story, and it unnerves her long after she and Axel leave this place. The third piece is inspired by a scene in Chapter 5, when our characters come upon the legendary knight Sir Gawain. He sits with his back to an oak tree as his companion Horace takes a break. His kindly creased face, his lanky proportions, his frayed and rusted armor are all accurate to the description in the book. But beyond that, Jana Heidersdorf has also captured his characterization and even the lighting effects from the passage. Note the childlike way his legs are splayed out, and the dappled pattern from the light falling through the branches above him. The greens and yellows evoke the natural setting, and the heavy shadows help this piece fit in with the others despite its lighter tone. The fourth image is from the description of Father Jonas, an old monk our characters seek out for advice and wisdom. They're snuck into his sick room where he recovers from the injuries he experienced from the crows. He is lit by his bedside candle, and his white hair, his large frame, his blankets, the sunken kind eyes, and the smile of his mouth convey his gentle nature, which is juxtaposed against the horror elements of his face and neck wounds, and the bloodstains that patch his nightshirt. The fifth illustration is a 2-page spread depicting a grisly scene. As they escape from the monastery, our characters are pursued by a savage monster through underground catacombs. The creature is described like a wolf without fur. It has reptilian qualities, and later it's suggested that it may be part dragon spawn. Gawain is able to decapitate the creature, yet the head continues to snarl and chomp even after it's been severed from the body. The knight and the others investigate. We can see them reflected with their candle in the pool of blood here. Gawain, Edwin, Axel, and Beatrice. As for the monster's severed head, it's described with one visible eye gleaming like a sea creature. It has a dog-like shape with an opaque membrane stretched tightly over sinews and joints. The texture of the monster is also described like it was blackened by flames rather than being covered in natural dark fur or flesh, and Heidersdorf has done a great job staying true to those descriptions here. The sixth image is of the warrior Wistan, who stalks the dragon Querrig in her lair. She lies at the bottom of a pit of stone and gravel, no longer the fierce creature she once was. She barely looks alive, with her head twisted to one side and her emaciated body looking like a dehydrating reptile. Ishiguro describes her skin, which should have appeared oiled and bronzed, as a yellowing white, and the remnants of her wings as dead leaves accumulated on either side of her. The artist has fully committed to accurately rendering the whole description, but the most thoughtful element may be the hawthorn tree which the dragon almost cuddles up to. In Ishiguro's text, it echoes back to the hawthorn tree from the Old Thorn, but Jana Heidersdorf cleverly mirrors the first image by having the lean of the tree and the sparse foliage fall to the opposite side here. It's a nice touch. The seventh and final image captures all the beauty and sorrow of the novel's ending. The sun sets on the cove by the sea. Axel walks alone on the shore in the shadows of this cliff's edge as the gulls scatter. He's described as walking with a slight limp, his back bent like one close to defeat, but he still has some small fire of strength within him, some strength that remains. I think this is my favorite of the bunch. I really like this upgrade of the Buried Giant. The Folio Society has included all the elements that I'm after in one of their editions. An illustrated slipcase, an original introduction, amazing artwork, and their standard high-quality build and binding. It has a cohesive design, and it lines up well with their previous 2 releases from Ishiguro. It's currently available from their website. The price is roughly 50% above what they typically charge for a novel at this trim size, which could be off-putting to some. But personally, I'm okay with my purchase. They didn't cut any corners, and Kazuo Ishiguro is one of my all-time favorite authors, so if it means I can add another one of his books to my collection, I'll pony up more cash to make it happen. And when it comes to my old trade paperback copy, I'm ready to move it to the box of doom, because now I have this amazing copy to take its place on my bookshelf. As always, thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for future videos. When it comes to the stories you love, it's always worth upgrading your books.